Hello, my name is Marcus,
And my name's Adam.
and today for our podcast, we're joined by Mark Fischer. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am an American who lives in Taiwan. Currently, I've been living in Asia for about 35 years. Um, about 30 years of that, I've been working in sports marketing and management. 12 years at NBA in various locations around Asia in senior roles. 4 years at the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and about 10 years in various other assignments through my own consulting company, which is called Fisher Sports and Entertainment. And it's a Singapore based company, but I currently am based in Taipei, Taiwan. And I help sports IP, sports properties, as well as brands who are interested in exploiting opportunities in this space, basically sports related entities in East Asia.
Um, this project you do is regarding EASL, right?
That's been my most recent assignment. Yes, I've been for the past year, really for most of 2024. I was the chief commercial officer for East Asia Super League. That project itself, which was mainly involved in me kind of getting their commercial operations structured and moving in the right direction, that project has wound up. So I am currently I've left that project, although I'm still a shareholder of East Asia Super League, so I'm still involved in the business, although not on a day to day basis.
What is your journey throughout your career, and what are some different successes and struggles that you faced leading up to your current moment?
I came into the NBA while I was actually after I had finished my master's degree, and my master's degree was actually in environmental policy and environmental management. So I thought I was kind of going in that direction. But I had previously been involved in media, both as a journalist and in the business side of publishing. In my previous Before I went to grad school, and so I was actually attracted back into that, or recruited back into that, to go to Beijing by a company in the mid '90s that was publishing foreign content magazines for the China market. And I was brought over to participate in a couple of those publications, and I said to my boss at the time, "Why don't we do an NBA magazine?" Because I could already see that China really loved basketball, and that was during the heyday of Michael Jordan. And so we decided to do a magazine about the NBA upcoming season. And that got me introduced to the NBA's office in Hong Kong because we wanted to license photos and branding from the NBA and for that to produce that magazine. Um, and that got me acquainted with them, and they ended up hiring me for an opening they had to open the Taipei office in 1997. So that was really my first big break to work for a major property. I'd already been in the workplace, career wise, after my undergraduate college degree for 12 or 13 years at that point, but never full time in sports. So that was kind of my big break to go into the sports business. And I haven't looked back. I've been there ever since. Um, I'd say some of the bigger challenges in that would just be setting up new businesses, hiring people. That's always a big challenge, is finding the right team, building the right team, training, all working together to grow something new. I opened the Taiwan office. That was new. I started the sponsorship and events business for NBA across Asia. I was tapped on the shoulder to be the first managing director of NBA's China business when Yao Ming was drafted. So these are all, starting things new is always a challenge, and putting together the right team, I'd say, is a huge component of that. And the other big challenge is really getting the word out to third parties, potential clients, business partners, especially sponsorship. That's one of the hardest but most important parts of growing a sports property. With the UFC, it was similar. It was the employee number one with the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and was really set up to grow that brand in Asia and really build the business. And so it started with me, and after 4 years, we had about a team of 20, and a nice sized business, both across media rights, events, and sponsorship, as well as other types of media content that we were producing for the UFC, across Asia, with a focus on East Asia, Japan, Korea, China, Greater China, and so forth. So yeah, that and then in the last 10 years or so, I've been really on different assignments through my consulting company. I guess the nice thing about having your own business is you get to choose kind of with whom you work for, how and when. You get to kind of build your own opportunities, and there's a good diversity of projects that you work on. The downside is you're always there's an expression, you're only as good as your last deal and your next deal. So there's quite a bit of business development that you're always going to have to do, really, to keep the business going when you're working for yourself. So those are some of the bigger challenges, and but we've had a lot of success along the way.
Do you have any like personal like not personal, but with like in your career, like early on from high school or maybe college, do you have any experiences or like interests that you think propelled you in this career, like interest in basketball or interest in UFC, and do you think that helped you in your career?
Yes, I do. I've always been a fan and a participant of sports. I grew up kind of in the traditional American sports environment where you normally played one of three or four or all three or four of the major sports. Football or touch football in the fall, basketball in the winter, or in some cases kind of all year round, and then baseball or softball in the spring. I wasn't a hockey player, but that was the fourth sport. I grew up in the Northeast, New York and Boston, and so ice hockey was quite prominent, or in some cases roller hockey. But I played in school. I played initially football, basketball, and baseball. I did actually in high school try lacrosse, which was a lot of fun. But I've kind of left that sport go a little bit, and I'm still a big fan of football, basketball, and baseball. Those are my favorite three. So I think just having that interest, I became a good basketball player. I was captain of my high school varsity team. It wasn't a huge high school, so that didn't make me great, but pretty good ball player. And all of that kind of propelled me and kept me interested in the sports field, and having a good understanding from a fan and a participant point of view. But I think, it's been a very competitive field to actually get into at younger ages. You need to have either relationships or some kind of break. And again, my break came, I think, when I was kind of involved in the media business, in a different part of the media business, because sports is ultimately a subsection of the greater media business. So I was in magazine publishing, but because it's a similar business, there was a lot of carryover, and it made me a good candidate to kind of transfer a lot of those skills and experience to the NBA. The other and really get my break in that area. I think the other experience that helped me is coming out of college. Even though I did some journalism, I was a freelance writer, and I thought I was going to maybe go into that field. I ended up doing partly to pay the bills, because until you're full time in journalism, you don't necessarily make a lot of money freelancing. And I also did sales, different types of sales roles, and had different types of sales training. And I think that was also a very valuable skill. A lot of my experience since then, and even with the NBA when I started, what made me attractive to the NBA to hire me was the fact that I had some sales experience where you have to go out, make pitches, and really sell, you know, a client on your services or your product or your brand. And that was the other area I think, besides understanding basically how media works, that I think made me an attractive prospect for the sports business. And also my experience at that point when the NBA hired me, I had already been living in Greater China, mostly Taiwan previously, but also a bit in Beijing, and I spoke Mandarin Chinese, not perfectly, but well enough to communicate. And that I think having that bilingual nature and cross cultural nature is very valuable when you're in an international role, in particular for a American or international company. If you're doing business, whether that's in Taiwan or China, somewhere in Asia, or even if you're in Europe, having that second language skill and second cultural understanding is quite important. That you can deal across two different cultures. So I think all of those things made was good preparation for entering the business.
Yeah, thank you. And earlier you mentioned that you didn't necessarily study what you were doing like now, like what your career involves nowadays. So looking back, would you have changed anything, maybe in your education or what you studied or what you majored, so that it better suits the career that you're in today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I feel very fortunate and I'm quite happy, kind of the long and winding path that my career has taken. I'm satisfied. However, I would think if I wanted to kind of go for that next level, one of the a couple areas that I may have worked a little bit more on. Not necessarily back in my day, we didn't actually have there was very few, if any, colleges that actually offered a sport marketing or a sport management program. So, I mean, I was a history major. I did write on the Michigan Daily in the sports department. Again, that's more of the journalism, but also kind of the sports interest side of things. But I would say, to kind of, if you look at a lot of the sports, uh, major sports properties, a lot of the top executive level are either they either have a law degree, they're formerly lawyers, or at least they've studied law at a high level, or a business degree, an MBA, or both. And I think if I wanted to really kind of get up to that next level, I would have maybe gone for one of those graduate degrees, and even maybe started my career with a little bit more formal training and experience in those areas, and that may have kind of propelled me to the next level in one of the organizations that I ended up working in. But other than that, I don't have any regrets and don't think I could have done much better.
You've mentioned that you were a freelance writer. I think I could speak for a lot of teens that a lot of my peers, we all want to start early to get into the business world, or it could just be side hustles. But I was wondering, growing up in high school and college, if there were any sort of small businesses you tried to make too, and what the experiences were like.
Sure. Yeah. Well, a friend and I had a summer business, both in between I think we started it maybe after my sophomore year of college, and we also did it again in between my junior and senior years of college. And it was back in Boston, where I was from, living at the time. I moved from New York to Boston when I was 12 years old. In downtown Boston, in the neighborhood, we had a business called M&M Maintenance, where we did painting, house painting, as well as small jobs, con you know sort of carpentry work for people. And that helped kind of get an initial feel and sense of the business world. You need to figure out how much to charge people, and you need to collect money, and you need to send out invoices, and see how much you're making, and share that with your partner and any staff that we would hire for different jobs. And so that was a good experience and initial exposure for me to the business world. I was also fortunate that through some family relationships right after college, I ended up getting a job in a field that I really knew very little about. But I think they hired me because I had a good college degree from the University of Michigan, and I had I just had a good head on my shoulders and was able to talk to people. And I had that good family relationship. I got a job with Kidder Peabody, which is an investment bank. It was one of the more prestigious ones of its day. It's kind of like Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley is today. And I was able to enter and go through their whole training program to become a stockbroker or a financial advisor, what they call today. In those days, they still called it stockbroker. And that gave me a lot of exposure to the financial world that I really hadn't studied much when I was in college. I was more focused on liberal arts and becoming a good writer and researcher, journalist, etc. And so that was quite helpful to give me further exposure to the business world. I did go back to writing and editing, including when I came out to Taiwan the first time in the mid '80s, and so I kind of left that financial side, but I always had it in the back of my mind of kind of how financial markets work and a lot of the aspects of the kind of the broader global business world that was quite helpful.
Coming from like America and then having to kind of lead a team and manage a team in Asia, East Asia specifically, do you think there's any cultural differences in like trying to manage your group of workers, or was it very easy to transition into?
Yeah, no, there was definitely some adjustment culturally in terms of working with and managing mainly Chinese colleagues, whether those would be Taiwan Chinese or whether those would be mainland Chinese, Beijing Chinese. There's certainly differences between Taiwan and mainland as well, but they're more similar to each other than say Americans are to Chinese. And I think part of it is making sure that face is a big part of managing, making sure people give people face, don't make them lose face in a public setting. I think is something to be more sensitive about. There's a little bit more of a kind of a sensitivity to how people are kind of looking and feeling. And as a leader, you need to be, very cognizant of setting a proper example in that regard. I think there's a little more leeway and flexibility about how you behave, maybe on an individual basis back in the States. And it's a little more emphasis on, say, performance versus maybe kind of very specific kind of ways of acting and relationships. And so there's a number of things to adjust to. But all good, and I've had a lot of experience at that by now.
I wanted to go back to my previous question. A lot of teens nowadays they feel stressed into applying colleges and regarding their early careers. I was just wondering if you had any advice you would give them with the
Yeah.
application process in their early careers.
I guess I would say that I think I wouldn't stress too much about exactly where one goes to college. It's a little bit of a status symbol. Um, if you're driving like a $60,000 car, okay, maybe you're looking better than if you're just driving a $20,000 or $30,000 car. But both cars will get you to the destination just as easily.
Hmm.
And so, whether you're going to, I don't know, I'm making this up, I don't know, Lehigh. Well, that's probably a very good college, actually. But I'm trying to think of something that's maybe in the mid range level versus an Ivy League school. Um, that shouldn't, there's nothing wrong with that mid range college or university. Maybe it's ranked, you know, 100 or it's ranked, 80 versus your friends who are going to a top 20 school. That top 20 school might be something that is, fun to talk about uh, by your parents. They can be proud of you for going to that top 20 school. But the education that you're going to get is probably just as good at, anywhere in the top 100. And so I wouldn't stress out because it's really up to the student. The student himself, him or herself, is the one who really determines the level of the learning that you get. There's going to be There's going to be great professors at every place. There's going to be great environments for learning. Everybody has good research materials. Everybody has access really to the same type of research materials and curriculum. And it's really up to the student to make the most of those years and that learning. Yes, if you graduate from Harvard, maybe you're going to have a better network to maybe get that first job, etc. But I don't think it matters that much. And it's not worth stressing about. It's not worth losing sleep over. I think that would be my advice. Yes, it's important, I think, to do something in the summers, or in your internships. It is important to do something. So, but it doesn't have to be exactly what you're going to be doing for your career. In fact, I think it's quite valuable not only for the individual, but even for the future employers and I think the employer recognizes this too, to see somebody who's done different things and has a diversity of interests and a diversity of experiences. I think employers appreciate that rather than somebody who's been on maybe a very single specialist track, and that's okay too. That's going to get you that specialist job. But what if you decide you want to do something else, and you might be very unhappy in that track? If you've had some diversity of experience, you've got a little more flexibility to bounce through different things. That was my experience, and I was quite happy with the way that my career took a little bit of a long and winding path. I was in a little bit after writing initially about electronics in my first job in Taiwan. I went to trading electronics and then ultimately manufacturing electronics, then into solar energy, then environmental policy, but then back to media. And it all worked out. And the important thing is wherever you are, whatever you're doing, do your best and make good relationships. And that's going to get you through. Even a relationship you might not think that is worth anything. 2 years down the road, that person might be in a position that you want to, at a company or some other position that you'd want to be able to call on, and they'll be able to get you that introduction. The relationships are really important, just as important as kind of doing your best at whatever you decide to do. But again, not worth stressing that much, not worth losing sleep over. You guys are in a great position going to a very good high school, and you're going to get into a very good college, whether that's an Ivy League or the 100th best college. They're all good. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be in good position. Maintain your high school relationships, maintain your college relationships, maintain your relationships that you make at the internships. Doesn't have to be forced. You don't have to fake a relationship with somebody that maybe you don't like and you wouldn't really have a common frame of reference with. But the ones that you do feel a real connection with, maintain those, and it'll whatever goes around comes around.
Yeah, I guess kind of to like follow up and like I guess sum it up. For anyone interested in kind of doing what you're doing right now in the industry you're in right now, especially in high school or in college, is there anything specifically that they should focus on? And also that you talked about having like a diverse experiences. Is there kind of like a balance of what people should be doing nowadays to go into an industry like yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple areas that are probably a little easier to work on as if somebody wants to go into sports or media that you could volunteer for, or that might be an easier access type of job during college. First of all, internships that are either volunteer or maybe not don't pay a lot, but during the summer, whether that's helping with events. A lot of people who run events, on ground events, that always takes a lot of labor and a lot of extra arms and legs. So that's something that people are always, I think, willing to bring on somebody junior and have them just help out around the event, whether that's, even doing the basic stuff, putting up signage, whatever, taking down signage, taking tickets, etc. That's always valuable to the employer, but it's also valuable to the high school or college student who wants to do a little extra work, because you're getting exposure to how an event works from the inside. And events, of course, are very important for sports or entertainment. The second area I would say is anything involving sales. And again, it might be just being an assistant to a lead salesperson, somebody who's in charge of, say, selling sponsorship or media rights or merchandise rights, and getting exposure, just helping them with anything they need. And maybe doing a little bit of putting together pitches, or maybe making some sales pitches. And even if you can't do that in the sports business, just doing some sort of sales where you're selling a product or a service, or you're helping somebody do that, I think is really good exposure. Because at the end of the day, if you can sell, or if people think you can sell, you're going to be a very hireable asset. Social media, etc., of course, is always good experience. That's important everywhere. What kind of jobs are available in that at your level, I'm not as familiar with anymore. But that's another area that can be quite important. Reading, writing, researching, and writing, always good. Although I guess now with Chat GPT, that kind of helps a lot in that area. But yeah, those would be just some of the diverse areas. Again, even if you don't get that perfect internship or job right away in your desired field, if it's an affiliated field, for example, I went into a different part of media initially before I was able to work in sports, but because there's a lot of related skills, I was able to enter sports because I'd already worked in media and I'd already worked in sales, and I already had the experience across cultures, et cetera, that made me attractive for that entry point.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for joining our podcast, taking your time out of the day to join us. We really appreciate it, and we
Yeah.
hope you have a really good New Year's.
Thank you very much. Take care, guys.